let's get bumpy, I guess.
Center of bumping.
Here we go. Welcome to Center of Weirdness, the weird podcast about very weird stuff, but mostly just weird TV episodes. I'm Josh, and with me, as always, is Skinner. Hey, Skinner.
Hey, Josh. Hey, all you monsters out there.
And this week on the show, we are discussing Bump in the Night, a animated series from 1994. Never heard of this before, never seen it. And it's something. It is, I'll give you the brief description in case you have never heard of this either. You're like me. It's the misadventures of a small green monster named Mr. Bumpy, a blue monster named Squishington, and a ragdoll named Molly Coddle in a bedroom of a 10-year-old boy. So, this is not traditional animation. This is actually like stop motion animation, which I think is probably the only interesting thing about it, maybe.
There's a Christmas special episode that appears from the art to maybe not be stop motion and be actually animated. And
oh, interesting.
That would, I don't think that would be any good. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's just the cover art, but
yeah. Well, so it looks. And Skinner, you found this information out while we were watching it, but it feels like a thing that would have run between shows on Nickelodeon or like MTV or like on Saturday morning cartoons, and apparently that is what it was.
Yes, so I went to the fandom wiki for Bump in the Night, which there is 235 articles in this wiki.
235 articles?
235 articles in this wiki. Josh, it is one of the better maintained fandom wikis that I've ever come across. It first started as television bumpers between commercials on ABC Saturday morning in 1993. This is where I remember it from. It's the interstitials, but
you know why it's stop motion?
Because making it full motion would have been a terrible strain on their hands.
One of the creators of the show, Ken Pontac, was a creator of Clay Fighter.
Oh, Clay Fighter, and thus Clay Fighter 63 and a half, 3/4 or whatever.
Yes, 63 and a third. Yeah, he created the game Clay Fighter, which I remember very much. Apparently, he also wrote on Gumby Adventures in the 80s. He created the video game Claymates, whatever that is.
Also bad. But yeah, this looks exactly like Claymate.
It does exactly like Clay Fighter, which I played quite a bit of because I thought it looked cool. And this has that similar look, and that makes a whole lot of sense now.
And they reference Elvis in this, and in Clay Fighters, there is blue suede goo.
I wonder if there was ever like one of these characters showing up in Clay Fighter, because there is a Clay Fighter Sculptor's Cut from '98, which these characters could have shown up in.
I believe that's the Blockbuster exclusive version of it.
Maybe that's the one that I played. Although I didn't have an N64, so there had to be a Genesis version of this one, right?
I imagine. I believe it was the originals were on all the 16-bit systems.
Okay, so I definitely played it. I liked how it looked. It looked very fun. And now, though, looking at screens of it, it looks like absolute dog shit.
It's not. It hasn't aged particularly well. I'm sure it has. Its backers, but it famously burnt out and got delayed and rushed, and just everything went wrong with the.
They gotta bring it back. Bring back Clay Fighter for the new era. Make some Clay Fighter NFTs or something.
These look very fungible,
it couldn't look any worse than anything else that's out there.
That is true. I don't see any trivia in the Mr. Bumpy section that he was in Clay Fighters.
That's disappointing. This guy also worked on some Sonic games, Sonic Colors, Sonic Generations. He worked on the TV series Happy Tree Friends, and a couple like Marvel shows and stuff. But yeah, so got a long history of working and stuff, and not just the creator, but the voiceover folks who are here. Main two, Mr. Bumpy and Squishington, are voiced by Jim Cummings and Rob Paulson, respectively. Both very high-profile voice actors when you could be such a thing. Now it's just celebrities doing voices. But yeah, at the time, I mean, Jim Cummings was mostly, I think, best known as doing like modern day Winnie the Pooh, right?
I think so, but like he is. This performance is Manic Pete.
Yeah, he's very much Pete, the big dog person from Goofy, but a slightly higher pitch.
I mean, this is specifically Goof Troop Pete. I'm thinking.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
You got to report to that Goof Troop. You understand?
Yeah.
Rob Paulson is Yakko Warner from and Pinky from Animaniacs.
Yeah, and Pinky and the Brain, and we I mean, you know him. It's very funny. We made a Doc McStuffins joke while we were watching this episode, which will become clear in a minute. And Jim Cummings has done some voices on Doc McStuffins, so
that's not shocking. And Molly is played by Gail Mathias, who was on SNL during the Charles Rocket era. So no one remembers that.
Weird like single season where they like got rid of everybody who was funny and then brought in some random
She
folks.
did Weekend Update. She was like one of the anchors of that. No one remembers.
I did not know that at all. Like I've never heard of her, honestly. She was in Bobby's World. She was in a couple other animated shows, but like
she's the most tolerable in this. Only because what they're going for with the other two characters is if you were like 7 or 6, like this would probably be like fucking hilarious. This might pace. Holy shit.
This might be one of the most manic shows I think I've ever watched. Like the opening alone is just, it's wild. It is just this camera zipping around in this bedroom, showing you all this stuff, and then you get to Mr. Bumpy, who sings a song. There's a lot of singing in this show. I will say too, before we go any further, this show is available on Tubi, so you can go watch it for free right now. I don't know if
use offer code Center of Bumpy.
Yeah.
To get a free account.
I don't know if I mentioned what episodes we are covering, because this is a kid show, so it has like little short segments. But we are covering episode 8, Made in Japan and Dr. Coddle,
which also may actually appears to be also it's the 8th episode, but is the first aired episode.
I don't know why they would pick this one, because
it doesn't introduce anything.
I mean, it does the thing that most
honestly.
No, it does the thing that most kids shows do, which is and most shows of the 90s do, which is, again, when we've already talked about it, gives you the entire premise of the show in the credits. So you sort of get that there's these weird monsters that live in this kid's room. I think there are episodes where you do see the kid, the 10-year-old, but you don't see him at all in these episodes. And there's just a bunch of random monsters and toys and stuff that interact and play with each other. So it's kind of a Toy Story sort of vibe. It's like basically if someone took Toy Story and Monsters Inc. and shoved them together. This is basically what this is.
This has the look of a claymation version of Monsters Inc. mixed with real monsters.
Yes, it does. It does very much have that. And I think this would be around the same time as Real Monsters. This is 94, and I think that show was about the same time, 94, 93, something like that.
I mean, we are deep in the, speaking of the Sega Genesis, deep in the Dayglow Sega years of gross out, puking, toilet joke humor. Like 90s, like this is
looks like Our Real Monsters. Our Real Monsters was the same year, started in 94 as well, but got 3 more years and basically twice the amount of epissodes that this thing did.
Never fucking like looking at Our Real Monsters. I was too old for it too anyways.
Yeah,
but like
that's fair.
also,
I will admit that I did enjoy it and watched it quite a bit.
I think it's the hair on the butts.
Yeah, there's a lot of, it is a very gross out show. Like it is, but there was something that I really enjoyed about it. I think it had the same kind of gross, because I think it's the same creators as Rugrats, so it still has that same sort of like gross looking character design, but there's something very sort of charming about it in a way, and it had interesting music, and I don't know.
This is not this Mr. Bump in the Night, Mr. Bumpy, like it's a lot. It is James Cummings is just going a million miles per hour. But if you just wanted Pete screaming in your face for a half hour, this is what you got. But like, of the two, so it's broken into two parts, two smaller chunks, which were made in Japan and Dr. Coddle MD. I thought Dr. Coddle MD, not a bad little deal. Like it uses the medium.
No,
everyone shuts up a little bit more. There's a few more actual gags requiring them to be clay, which is important. And it's less. The first one is a lot of still shots of Squishington and Bumpy just talking and talking a million miles per hour. Like Squishington's performance. Like if there was a big screen adaptation of Bump in the Night, which there never will be, like it's just they're almost Timon and Pumbaa to a degree.
Yeah, a little bit.
Like if these two actors did the TV version of Timon and Pumbaa's voices, which isn't out of the realm of possibility, I would not have been shocked.
So let's talk about Made in Japan really quick. So they're eating some sugary cereal, and on the back of the box, there is an offer to send in the box top for a turbo torturanoid robot that they'll send to you. And so of course Mr. Bumpy is all about this. He wants a big robot to do, I guess, to play with. It's never really clear why he wants this. He just wants it. And so they send off the box tops, and he's a little disappointed because it hasn't arrived yet. And then finally it does come, and he's disappointed because it's not what he thought it was going to be. It's this little tiny little robot figure that he feels like he's been ripped off. And didn't get what he wanted, though he basically sent in a piece of cardboard and got a toy from it. So, I mean, like, I think he won in that arrangement, even if it's not what he was hoping for.
So, I have two things here real quick. One, they were in the Timon and Pumbaa TV show.
Oh, were they?
They were busy being two of the hyenas.
Okay.
Which makes sense from this episode, and for yelling and screaming and being crazy. Did you ever send away for it? I mean, I never collected and sent it away for anything, except for one. One time I bought from one of these displays. I got a giant Crayola thing, which is like the big plastic like clamshell, except for like the size of an Xbox, full of every crayon they offered. But I actually paid for that. It was just an offer on one of the boxes.
You know, I don't think that I ever did. Like, I think that I always thought about it, and I was like, oh, this would be, I wish I could do this, and then I just never did it, because I think I was just kind of lazy. And that's
pretty much mine, too. I always figured in Canada that I couldn't do it.
Yeah, they would just throw it in the trash when they saw that you lived in Canada.
Or like the shipping would be too much. It was, because there's always this, thing of like, especially in the 80s, there were special Transformers and G.I. Joes you could only get through mail order, like Sergeant Slaughter or William the Refrigerator Perry or... like my friend got...
those things would fall apart as soon as you got them.
My friend got the camera Transformer, the Perceptor that turned into... the one that turned into 3 pieces. He got that through mail order. And I'm like... I just remember thinking, like, how did you do that? Like, your parents let you do that? That's something other kids do. Not kids that I know. But like, did you ever have like a favorite cereal toy that you weren't disappointed in?
No, because like I said, I don't. I mean, I guess I remember getting stuff out of the out of the boxes, but that was never anything like special, or that was always just junk that I would forget about or give up on pretty quickly.
Pick out cereals for what was in it, but it was it wasn't Happy Meal level toys.
Yeah, no, it was never that good. Like I do remember that stuff. I remember the oh God, there was some other podcast that I was listening to that was talking about the things you could get at Pizza Hut, the Casper like ghost things that they had. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Those like big like plasticky ghost body things with holes in them and that you could put on your hand or whatever. They were like puppets sort of, but not really. They weren't that big, but they were just these big plastic things that you would just have, I guess, because they looked cool. And I do remember those very fondly. And I remember the Simpsons dolls from Burger King.
I had Homer from that.
Yeah.
That was a big deal. That was like one of the first like Simpsons tie-in things.
Yes. And because that was like really early 90s when the show was just like picking up steam. And I loved it.
It was like, it's been on forever. It's a cultural thing. It like before Homer became super quotable for everything, like Bart Simpson Mania was fucking red hot in a way that no one you can't even explain these days. But
he was a bad influence on the children of America, telling them to not have a cow and to I think this is our second Bart Simpson reference so far on the show, but to not have a cow and to eat his shorts, and parents were not happy with that.
And right now I'm looking at some of the Fraggles in vegetable go-karts that I bought off eBay that were Happy Meal toys.
Yeah, so that was always like the step up, getting something from a cereal box. I never really had the good experience with that because it was easy just to go to get the stuff from like a restaurant or whatever, but it was much harder to like, all right, now I got to cut this off and then I got to get an envelope and I got to get a stamp and then I got to get somebody to take me to the mailbox or
Did you find it weird when like they fucking like when people were like, oh, like when it turned out kids could choke on this shit. And they had to stop doing it. What I can't, like, it's hard to explain to kids today. Like, because I think I don't remember stuff ever coming with Holly's. My daughter's, if you're new to the show, I have a daughter. My daughter's cereal growing up, like that wasn't a thing. But like when they said toys were in the cereal, toys were in the cereal.
Yeah, you had to dig down in there and get it out.
It was in there with it, and like. When it came out and like, oh, like, they can't do that anymore because of the choking hazard, my immediate thought was, well, yeah.
So yeah, Mr. Bumpy is he's not too happy, but so he's just kind of like, well, whatever, I don't care about that toy. So it's not because it's not exactly what he wanted. He just relegates it to trash and doesn't worry about it and goes to sleep.
His character trait seems to be asshole.
Yeah, pretty much. And Squishy, who is like a blue kind of creature who lives in the back of the toilet. So that makes, I think we kind of came to the conclusion that he might be one of those like scrubbing bubble blue toilet discs that has like melted down and not completely dissolved yet.
He has a nice place in there.
He has a cool apartment that looks like a Vaporwave album cover. And lots of tile and like really interesting like pools and stuff.
Yeah, pools in there. Interesting. He's a very dramatic character. This is their second show where someone has used the toilet for the Puppy University show, whatever the fuck it was called on Netflix. That's not technically part of Center of Weirdness canon, but that show did have everyone using toilets for transportation.
Oh, very true. Yeah, this is toilet for a living situation. But in the night, he hears some noise and he goes out to investigate and he sees the robot has turned into this big, giant, imposing robot that's kind of stomping around. And he's freaking out and he is trying to get Bumpy to see this, but Bumpy's like sleeping, having a dream about his mother trying to make him wear a pink dress, which I'm very curious about that.
I always kind of worry about this is the first episode of your kids' clay show on ABC Saturday morning cartoons need a little bit of gay panic.
Yeah, and it's also like, isn't this the plot of Sleepaway Camp? Where the mother is making a boy dressed like a girl, and then at the end she goes wild and murders a bunch of people. I
think we can probably nail it down to being a sleeping camp reference.
Yes, exactly. They're throwing Sleepaway Camp. They're throwing that in there.
Yeah.
But he won't wake up, and
I like sleeping camp better, honestly.
I'm going to sleeping camp. What do you do there? Well, you sleep a lot.
Man, I could use that so fucking much.
That's the adult summer camp that you need. Nobody wants to go do fucking activities. Just it's not sleepaway camp. It's sleeping camp. Oh, what do you do here? Well, you just come and take a nap for as much as you want.
We went down a hole once in an episode about adult sleepaway camps, didn't we?
Yeah.
Is there a documentary on one that we can do for this fucking show that's short?
No, probably not. I mean, I'm sure there might be a documentary out there, but nothing short. Because
I hope COVID killed those.
I'm sure
like it did a good percentage of the population of Earth.
I'm sure that it did. We did miss the joke about the because he's disappointed about how his turbo tortrinoid robot turned out, that if they eat all of the sugar frosted shark puff cereal, then they can send off the box top for the Ditch Avenger, which is this like submarine that I guess can do something that will also probably be disappointing. But Squishy finally catches the robot after he kind of shows it to Bumpy, who doesn't believe him because it's tiny, and he shows it to Molly, Coddle, the doll, who doesn't believe him because it's tiny. He finally catches sight of it very big, and he knocks it over with a plunger. And then it turns out that the robot is Japanese, and apparently
what does that mean the show has to do then?
Well, the show has to then play like a Japanese lute over the soundtrack every time that the robot is talking. Thankfully, it seems, again, I do not speak Japanese, so I'm just going off the assumption that they hopefully did this correctly, but it seems like they hired someone who speaks Japanese to do the voice of this robot. I hope. And the Squishy is worried because he cannot understand the robot at first, but then realizes, oh, he can read the subtitles because this is a cartoon, and of course he can. So they are able to communicate, and basically the robot explains that he was sent to America against his will, and he misses his family back in Japan. So it's like a really weird, like, I'm not sure what they're trying to say, because again, this is for children. So are they trying to say, don't send in your stuff, or don't buy from Japan, like buy American only? Like, I don't get what they're trying to say with this.
I'm not sure either. And I don't think they do, because this ends in like 5 seconds.
Yeah, because basically he goes, oh, you want to go home? And then we see him putting him into a box that's marked Japan on it. And then he goes, and then he gets a letter back, and then that's it. The episode is just over.
He literally puts in the box, and he says, we can be pen pals. And then 1 second later, he says, I just got a letter from my pen pal. And then Bumpy comes in and says, what happened to my robot? And then he looks at the screen, and the episode ends. Like, it is literally that fast. And I was completely okay with that.
Yeah. So it's like a very quick, random thing here. You said you did sort of remember this show?
Sort of. I remember the interstitials for sure. It may have played on. So anything that play, like, Canada had a few less TV channels than America, and we got in the early 90s we got a big push of new ones. One was YTV, youth television. It showed a lot of the Nickelodeon stuff that we had never gotten.
Oh yes, of course.
And
I think that
that's where Reboot comes from.
What's from what?
That's where Reboot comes from.
That's also, I think, where Are You Afraid of the Dark comes from.
Yes. So they're the ones that partnered up with a lot of the with ABC an awful lot and a couple of other channels, we would often get slightly like things would be slightly more edited and toned down for the American versions.
Yeah.
They didn't like when they gave Dot bigger breasts and separate breasts in Reboot season 3.
Well, we'll have to be talking about one of those episodes.
Yes, but they if this made it onto there, I would have come across it in some fashion because it would have been shown like a million times.
Well, the reason I asked that is because on IMDb's contributor zone, there is a question that says, by what name was Bump in the Night officially released in Canada in English? And it wants me to enter what that answer is. So I was hoping that you could give it to me.
Let me check the fandom while you set up the next episode that we're covering here.
So there's as is usual with or with animated shows at this sort of time, you got 2 little segments within one 30-minute episode. And this episode does a good job of giving you something a little bit extra at the end, which we'll talk about. But this is the second segment, Dr. Coddle. And this is the better of the 2 segments for sure, because there's a little bit more room for it to breathe and it feels a little more lived in. Whereas the first one felt like it was it's weird because I felt like the first one would have been one of those things that would come at the end of the episode. Like they would have the longer story up front and then they would do the little short funny one, that would just get you in and out really quick. But for whatever reason, they decided to do the short one first. And funny story though, before we move on to Dr. Coddle, I just saw that apparently season 2, episode 12 of this show is called Made in Japan 2. And it's about a little robot emailing himself to Squishy to escape destruction. So I don't know if it's the same robot, but it certainly seems like it must be.
How many robots? You can't have, if you have too many robots in the show, you're just going to confuse kids.
Yeah, and there's also a robot as part of the cast, though it does not show up in either of the episodes we watched, called Destructoid, I think, because they introduce him in the opening credits song. And I don't think that he doesn't show up at all in the episodes that we saw. But anyway, moving on, Dr. Coddle. We open with Bumpy wearing a bandana as a cape, jumping around, calling himself Bump Man, which I think every high school. Yeah, he's the claymation Dark Man, or that every high schooler kid with bad skin found themselves being called in ninth grade. But he tries to fly and ends up falling down and getting a splinter.
This is funny because he falls and goes ow 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 ow, but he does that for a while.
Oh, this is a show that likes reusing animation for jokes. And actually, this was kind of funny because it is the same animation just looped a couple times.
Yeah, I mean, the whole final segment is all that is.
Well, yes, that is totally true. But he is laying on the ground. He says, "Ooh, I got a splinter," and he holds his finger up, and there's this big giant piece of wood sticking out of it. And Molly comes over and she helps him pull it out by using these big giant pliers and pulling it out of his finger. And he says, "Oh, that was great. Have you ever thought about being a doctor?" And this gives her this great idea of like, all right, well, I'm going to do that. So she sends off for a certification, I guess.
A correspondence college, which was very big at the time.
Yes, and something that kids knew all about and loved jokes about it. She gets all of her stuff. She gets her certificate and her medical bag and all of these books. And as the books come through the mail slot, they crush Mr. Bumpy, and he is flattened. And
which is what you want in an episode of a clay show.
Yes, exactly. And he lays there for quite some time, which was pretty funny because normally they just like.
Eventually, they put their thumb in their mouth and they blow hard. And they get three-dimensional again, which he does do eventually, but he takes a while. It takes like a good 2 minutes to do it.
Yeah, it takes him a little bit of time, but he lays there for a bit, and she runs off to get help from Squishy. And while she is gone, he proceeds to eat all of her medical books. Basically,
I didn't see that coming. Honestly, that he was just going to eat them.
No, he eats one page, and because he says, "Let me look into here and see if I could become a doctor." And he eats the page, and I thought, "Oh, does he acquire information via eating?" Which would be interesting, but no, apparently not. He just likes eating paper, and he says he has a taste for knowledge, and then proceeds
eating rainbow.
And he proceeds to eat most of the books, and so basically she comes back, and he realizes that she's going to be upset with him, so he shoves a bunch of other manuals and instruction guides into her binders, including cooking guides, automotive repair guides, like gardening guides, all this random stuff that he kind of shoves in the book, and she doesn't notice. And I wasn't sure what they were trying to imply, that like she's an idiot, or she just, because it clearly seems like if she had any sort of intelligence whatsoever, she would gather pretty quickly that it wasn't accurate. And like, I think that it could have been, I think maybe there is a way for them to have done the same episode, but maybe her say like, you know, I knew what you did and I was teaching you a lesson, you know, like kind of inflicting all this torture on you because you tried to make me, you know, believe that this was my book and didn't take me seriously enough. But no, she's just kind of stupid and doesn't notice that there's like that these books are obviously cooking manuals.
No, she doesn't. But I mean, it's like I said, you could have got there with all the same gags and not making her stupid. I don't know, man. It's just they're all kind of dumb. It's weird when Mr. Bumpy's the smartest one and he just ate a fucking book.
Exactly. So
I mean, even the guy who lives in a fucking toilet took one glance at them and was like, "Hey, those aren't medical journals." Like, and he, like within seconds, he just glanced at her. But hey, we don't know. Maybe there's an episode that comes on after the first aired episode that explains that she is really stupid or is missing a brain.
Maybe. She comes back and with Squishy because she tells Squishy that he looks like he was or feels like he was squished by an elephant, and Squishy gets excited because he wants to see an elephant for some reason, even though he's kind of got like an elephant-like look to him. And he looks sort of like Max Rebo, sort of.
Sort of like Max Rebo, kind of an elephant, kind of a Barber Papa. He's just a kind of shape.
Yeah.
He looks like he's melting.
Yes, he does. That's why we thought the whole like blue toilet thing. But he comes back and he notices, like you said, that the books are clearly not accurate, and Bumpy doesn't want him to reveal what he did, so he like slaps him a Band-Aid over his mouth and said, "Oh, he must be sick too."
Yeah, and like, don't let the goof know that you've that we ate the books.
Yeah, and
I just kept waiting for him to call someone the goof.
And he so they both end up getting treated. She puts them in like or she puts Bumpy in a bed, and then she ties Squishy to like a hand truck and stands him up.
Yeah, then it becomes Hostel 3.
Yes, it's a very weird sort of situation, because then she goes off looking for a bunch of things that she needs to do the medical equipment, or the medical treatment, which is like a bunch of random like gardening tools, but then also like some sort of weird mini television or tuning device, audio tuner, which I didn't totally understand what that was. And she brings all of this stuff back and then proceeds to essentially torture Squishy by putting a bunch of random junk on him, like cutting up carrots and putting on him, and like
saying he had root rot.
Yes.
Trying to make sure his little tendrils were erect. It gets a little dirty at times, and then the end they kind of admit that it is naughty when she's trying to blow air back into Squishington, and he's like, "Oh, that's a little too forward there."
Yeah, he's like, not in public. People will see us. And it's just like, I mean, I get it, but it is also kind of strange. And so she does all this stuff to him, and like it kind of messes with his brain. She puts like an antenna, sort of a television top antenna receiver looking thing on his brain that then proceeds for him to start talking like he's Bumblebee in the new Transformers movies, doing a bunch of like news broadcasts and random shit.
This was a chance to have him say "narf," and he didn't fucking do it.
But it allows him to show off his range by switching to different types of voices very quickly, and eventually it like messes him up, and eventually Bumpy kind of burps, and part of the manual pops out of his mouth.
Man, I love a good burp vomit gag. Just makes me never want to eat for like the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, these characters are disgusting looking, but I guess it sort of fits with what they are.
Well, they live in filth.
Yeah, that's true. Bumpy,
which is a 10-year-old. Like it's funny that they, in theory, their setting is just underneath a 10-year-old's bed.
Yes,
but it's like this kid is disgusting.
Yeah. I mean, I guess we could assume that if we're going to apply that Squishy is an undiluted, like, scrubbing bubble cleaning disc, then I guess Mr. Bumpy is like a hardened booger.
I guess he's a hardened booger, yes.
Yeah,
who's the size of a comfort doll.
Oh yes. Oh yeah. When in the robot episode, the Made in Japan, she refers to herself as a comfort doll, right?
Yes.
What is that? You said you looked that up. That's a weird phrase.
Well, here's the weird thing. Like, it just appears to be knitted dolls.
Okay.
But the first Google has a people also ask, which they often do, and they also always give a weird, obscure, not number one answer on these things when you click on it. It says, what is a comfort doll? A comfort doll is a small knitted doll used by iCross Canada instead of using packing peanuts or bubble wrap to protect delicate vials of HIV/AIDS drugs and medical instruments. They use dolls.
What?
Yep. That's what I said.
Wow. So you think that they did that intentionally?
I think this was a very specific thing to this iCross Canada. And
okay.
They, for some reason, decided to make it the number one answer on Google.
I mean, to me, comfort doll very much sounds like some pervert has saved up a couple paychecks and has bought himself a comfort doll.
Yeah, and I mean, like, this is a disgusting bedroom in a disgusting area. Like, it seems within the realm of possibility. Here's this doll who's had to have pieces of herself changed out from overuse.
Also, do you think that means that, like, if this is
if you're wondering if this doll shows its underwear all the time, it does.
But if this doll is a comfort doll, and we don't know whether or not this 10-year-old boy has a sister, we could just assume that he's probably doing some fucked up shit with this doll.
I mean, everything about this setting assumes this kid is doing some fucked up shit. Thank God Squishington lives in the fucking toilet, because otherwise, man, that guy's a clum baby. Like, if he lived in a sock, we know what he is.
Very true. Yeah. That's very gross.
That's very visceral, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's disgusting.
After these messages, we'll be right back on TGI Saturday morning with this blob of semen. I mean, Mr. Squishington.
Yeah, this booger and this toilet disc are hanging out with this sex doll. But yeah, so the page that he burps up does specifically say that it does not replace medical school and should not be used for any sort of medical treatment, to which my thought was, then why did they fucking send out all these fucking books?
it's irony. They just want your money. We don't know what she spent though, because she's the size of money.
Yeah, like I mean, they don't bother getting into that because it doesn't matter because it's a kids show. But it is very funny that this little doll could somehow get a letter and a potential check, a mail order check or something to.
Maybe she had COD.
Maybe, yeah, maybe so.
Apparently, Mr. Bumpy is a closet monster.
A closet monster. Okay, that's what we're
not
calling
a pocket
it.
monster.
Yeah, sure. We're calling it a closet monster. Okay.
He's a closet mon.
Yeah, that's the spot. That's the spot where he goes and like jizzes on the wall or something, and then it just becomes Mr. Bumpy.
Go bump in the night, thump, 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 thump.
So she gets upset and she runs off, and because she realizes how stupid she is, and Squishy is having a really hard time because he's still got some, like, his eyes are all scrambled like radio waves and stuff, and he's kind of out of it. And
not a non-improvement, honestly.
No. And Bumpy is worried that he's going to die, essentially. So he goes back and asks her to help. And she comes back and tries her best, which basically just results in her giving him mouth to mouth, which causes him to wake up and say, "Oh, not in public. People will see." So I don't know if they have something going on or not, but who's to say? And then they decide to proceed with a manualectomy, where they're going to use pliers to get inside of Mr. Bumpy and pull out all the pages that he's eaten. And it's gross because the camera just spins right down into his gullet as the episode ends.
That once again, very visceral. We did see the Chekhov's giant pliers earlier in the episode. So
very true. Yeah. Oh, I will say one thing that is kind of fun here. There's a couple of fun visual gags where when she's trying to bring him back. I think the first time when she's working on him, we see this like meat thermometer type thing where it says like, broil, bake, really, really done kind of thing. And then when she comes back to try to save him, you see that same thermometer, but words on it have been replaced. And when she finally brings him to, the little needle rolls over to cured, which I thought was pretty funny. And I think that they do a good job of animating these characters. Like, this is not a lazy show. Like, there's plenty of animated shows that are super fucking lazy, but for whatever reason in the 90s, they took that shit seriously and like really put their work into it. And it makes sense that it's from some guy who likes doing claymation, because the character design is, I think, interesting enough. It's gross, which is appropriate. And the animation is not too bad.
No, like it's not skipping frames. Everything's smoothly done.
Yeah,
I mean,
for sure.
It's very fleshed. Like, everything feels very fleshed out, for better or worse, for their setting. It is using a lot of the voice work to cover corners as far as like having to do more than enough. But
yeah,
there's clearly a lot of money for whatever. Like, there's no money you can make off this thing. It's not toyetic.
I don't know, man. I bet if
I bet you this thing had, if it had toys, it was from fucking Subway.
I'm actually going to look that up. I'm going to see if there were Bump in the Night toys.
I'm going to look.
There was a shit ton apparently. Oh my God. Did you look this up?
No, I didn't look anything up
because
on
one of the first image search options, it fucking says Bump in the Night Subway. So on eBay, oh my God, on eBay, you were right. eBay, Subway, 1995 Bump in the Night monster cartoon PVC figure doll.
What would you do with these things?
They had dolls of Dr. Coddle, Molly Coddle, who has a very buff arm, which I didn't notice in her character model.
So she's the what they based that character off on in Lady in the Water.
Yes. It is funny. This listing does not have a Mr. Bumpy, but it does have Squishington. So you could get, I guess, one of those. You couldn't get both, though. Or maybe you could, I guess, but it might have to be a different it might have to be a different purchase. So or no, you could get both. You could get Molly Coddle and Squishington, but I don't see I don't see what Mr. Bumpy looked like. There also looked like there were some posable action figures, which look pretty harrowing.
I mean, in theory, it's the easiest one to make because they have 3 dimensions. Like one of the problems with those early Burger King Simpsons character dolls, which were exceedingly popular, is that like that was the first attempt to say this is what the Simpsons look like in 3 dimensions.
Yeah, they don't quite capture it.
Are literally the models they use are things you could make toys from.
Yeah,
I just
totally.
don't see why anyone on the fucking planet would want that with their cold cut trio.
I mean, I don't think I was going to Subway a ton in '95, but I definitely did go occasionally, and I do not remember these at all, which is so
worked at
strange.
Subway for a summer, and because I am a sandwich artist, but like if you had told me that we had any ongoing kids toy tie-ins, I have no idea. I worked a night shift, so I worked until like 4 a.m. So I never saw kids, but like I wouldn't know where the fuck in the store they were at.
Wow. Yeah, there was a listing on eBay where you could get all 4. It had all 4 plus a little mini pamphlet that came with the toys. And there's some size disparity that doesn't quite work, but I mean, what do you expect? But yeah, interesting. Wow, you nailed it with Subway, man. You did it, which is very funny. I have a funny story, not really a funny story, but I have a story about Jim Cummings as well.
I wish Jim Cummings had played Squishington instead.
But I went to I don't want to blow up his spot, but I went to a restaurant here in Burbank, California, pre-pandemic. So it was a couple years ago, and we were eating and looked over, and at the bar. So we were sitting in the bar area, but at a table. But at the bar was Jim Cummings having a beer and eating some food with some person. I don't know who he was with, but people like kept coming up to him and like
they kept Cummings up to him.
Yes, they kept Cummings up to him and asking for photos and like talking to him and stuff. And it took me a second to kind of like realize who he was because he looked familiar, but I couldn't quite place exactly.
It's the facial hair and small face compared to the rest of face.
And I couldn't quite place him, and it took a second, and it finally clicked with me, and then it made sense why everybody was coming up to him. It's like, oh, it's the voice of Winnie the Pooh and a bunch of other random characters, and so it totally made sense. But yeah, he just was sitting there chatting with people and like seemed to be okay with it for the most part, like not too annoyed by people recognizing him. But yeah, so that is the end of the segments, but it's not the end of the episode. We get a exceedingly long karaoke jam with Mr. Bumpy and Squishington.
No one wants this, but this I feel like because the name of this song was called "You Gotta Say You're Sorry," this is the educational segment of the episode they had to put in.
Oh, okay. So it has some impact on the episode story that we just saw, because Mr. Bumpy did a bad thing and he should apologize to Molly Coddle.
So this is basically reused footage while Jim Cummings and Rob Paulson sing. But I want to name some of the songs you would, if you were to go through the whole series.
Yeah,
you would come across.
I'm very sad that we didn't go through some of these, or we didn't. We kind of just randomly picked this one, so we just stumbled upon it. And I kind of wish that we had gotten some of these other songs.
Okay, "Why Do You Like Me," sung by Mr. Bumpy and Squishington. Always a good name for a song.
That's a ballad. I like that. And on the wiki, it does give it does give like the style of music that it is.
Like Gotta Have It, rapped by Mr. Bumpy.
Oh my God, I may have to watch that one just to see how cringy it is.
You Need a Hug, rapped by Molly. That's hip hop. Go Away and Don't Come Back by Squishington. School's Out by Alice Cooper, sung by Mr. Bumpy, 70s rock.
Amazing. All right, cool.
Good Golly, Miss Molly, You Sweet Comfort Doll, sung by Squishington, 50s rock.
Whoa. All right.
I'm Bigger Than You, sung by Destructo and Mr. Bumpy, similar to Iron Man by Black Sabbath.
Wow. Okay.
They sing an alternate version of the theme song at least twice.
Interesting.
Go Away and Don't Come Back is done twice. I Live in the Porcelain, sung by Squishington, a reggae song, is possibly the one that I'm most curious about.
Oh man, What Goes Up Must Come Down, sung by Mr. Bumpy and Albert Einstein.
Weirdly, he's not in the IMDb.
And it's a hip hop jam. That's in Made to Japan 2, which is the sequel to the one that we watched. And apparently in that episode, they just replay the first Made in Japan. So they just put both of them together.
So here's what drives me crazy. So I mentioned this Christmas special, which apparently is a claymation. That's good. It's 64 minutes long, which seems like holy shit. But the IMDb description of it says Molly Cottle takes over as pageant director while Mr. Bumpy and Squishington enter the North Pole. And I don't know why that phrasing just drives me crazy.
Yeah, and then the North Pole enters them, I'm sure. Yeah, man, this was pretty interesting just because I'd never heard of it before. Apparently, Shout Factory did release the entire series on DVD back in 2010. So apparently it must have some fans and some nostalgia attached to it. I can't.
I bet the VHSs of this shit cost like $64 for one episode.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure if you were to look on eBay or something like that, it would probably be very expensive. But it didn't quite work for me. I think that it's fun enough, but
I think it's too. I don't know. There's just not enough gags. Every time it did a classic gag, I was like, oh, I like that, but it's just there's something it's not doing. I can't quite figure out.
Yeah. Some of the VHS tapes on eBay looks like the Mr. Bumpy's Karaoke Cafe VHS tapes are about like $4 and $7. There's not too much. There's a Bump in the Night Mr. Bumpy Tales from Under the Bed, which is like $40. And then there's the Bump in the Night Mr. Bumpy flexible action figure, super rare, which is $54.
What did what did Max and PJ call themselves? Was it the Bumpinators or?
Oh, from Goof Troop?
Yes. I had to look this up now.
Well, while you look that up, I guess we should go ahead and kind of wrap things up here and formulate our weird rating for this episode. So we do on the weird scale, we do 1 to 10, the weirdo meter, I guess, whatever we're calling it these days. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess this is definitely. It's definitely weird. I will give it that. It is one of the probably of the things that we've watched so far on this show. I think this takes the cake as the weirdest thing that we have watched.
I'm gonna give it like a 8 out of 10 because this is perfectly fine as interstitials where they come in, they like turn in, they use the claymation, turn into the shapes of the A, B, and C for ABC, or do something quickly, grossly. Contort, whatever, right?
Yes.
And say after these messages, we'll be right back. What was the appeal of this? Like, it's not defined enough. It isn't quick enough. They had to fill it with singing because it probably cost so fucking much. They're clearly going for it, but just, man, I don't know how this made it to air.
I mean, as we already kind of mentioned, this was in that era of gross out kids shows. Obviously, Ren and Stimpy was there, Our Real Monsters, this, The Simpsons to an extent that wasn't necessarily gross out, but so there were all these things that could they were sort of pushing the bounds of what could be done with animated kid shows at this point, I think. And I think this definitely fits. I think that you are right on the money with I was kind of going between 7 and 8. I feel like 8 is fair because this is pretty strange for this type of show. Like this is a very strange show.
Like a lot of things in this era got greenlit. Like there's a bunch of cartoons you don't remember that were just really off the wall concepts, other than like this is extreme sports or extreme gross outs, like those Zoid cartoon with the sports robots and shit.
I don't know what that is. We have to watch that on the show.
Okay, I'll send you the theme song because that's all that really matters to that one. Like everyone, like the main character's name has to be ZZ, so it's just stupid. Because that's the whole concept is kids like robots and the letter Z because it's 1992 or something. But yeah, like this one, I just, like I said, with the toys at Subway, it's not like what like did anyone see the Island of Misfit Toys and think like, man, I fucking wish this was a little bit grosser and was a half-hour TV show. And on Goof Troop, PJ demonstrated his strengths mainly with his deadly rump, which earned him the title the Bumpinator.
Oh, there you go, the Bumpinator. Before we wrap up, I was looking at some of the other episodes that I don't know. Maybe we'll revisit this show one day. And there's one There's one at the very end. No, we won't. There's one at the very end, the last episode of the season. Season 2, right before the Christmas special. It's called Not a Leg to Stand On. And the episode is about Bumpy being accused of stealing Molly's feet.
Oh, that would have been the episode.
Yeah, he big freak. And I did look up, I tried to look up Bump in the Night interstitials on Google just to see if anything came up. And the top result was an article from familydoctor.org that said it's about interstitial cystitis, which is bladder pain syndrome.
Hooray!
So that's what Mr. Bumpy is. He's a painfully bumpy bladder.
As good as an explanation as anything.
But that's going to do it for this episode of Center of Weirdness. Thanks so much for joining us as always. And until next time, when we are back talking about something else weird, I've been Josh.
I've been Skinner.
Keep it weird out there and keep it bumpy.
I was really hoping you'd say keep it bumpy. And you did.
You've been listening to Center of Weirdness. If you like this show, rate and review us wherever you find it, but especially on Apple Podcasts. You can listen to every episode at centerofweird.com, where you can also find all of the old Predictocast episodes. And if you want to get in touch with us to tell us about a show we should cover, hit us up on Twitter at WeirdCenter. As always, thanks for listening.